Welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. Tonight, we return to a story most of us first heard as children. A story about rejection, loneliness, and transformation. A story about a small gray creature mocked by everyone around him, until one day he became something beautiful. But that is not the version waiting for us tonight. Tonight, the duckling does not become beautiful. Tonight, the cruelty does not make him gentle. Tonight, the cold does not teach him grace. It teaches him hunger. So settle in, turn down the lights, and listen closely. Because somewhere beyond the reeds, beyond the black water, something huge is moving beneath the moon. Now, let's begin. The egg was larger than the others. Mother Duck noticed it from the beginning. It sat at the back of the nest, like a pale stone dragged from the bottom of a river. The other eggs were small and smooth, warm beneath her soft body, speckled lightly, and shaped the way eggs were supposed to be shaped. This one was swollen, grayish-white, and strangely heavy. When she shifted her weight over it, she could feel something inside press back, not with the delicate stirring of an ordinary chick, but with a slow, patient force. The nest lay beneath broad green dock leaves at the edge of an old farmyard. Beyond it stretched a pond, thick with lily pads and duckweed. The water smelled of mud, rain, and rotting stems. Dragonflies stitched bright lines through the summer air. Beyond the pond stood the farmhouse, low and crooked, with whitewashed walls stained green near the foundation, a mossy roof, and windows that reflected the sky like blind eyes. Mother Duck had chosen the place carefully. It was hidden from foxes, shaded from the worst heat of the day, and close enough to the farmyard that the hens and geese and ducks could be heard fussing from morning until night. She had waited long for her eggs to hatch. The days were warm, but they felt longer than they should have. The other ducks had already led their ducklings to the pond. The hens scratched around the yard with their chicks following them in frantic little clouds. Even the old turkey had begun to strut past Mother Duck with a kind of smug pity, puffing his chest, dragging his tail feathers through the dust, and making that dreadful gobbling sound as if he owned the sun itself. Still, Mother Duck waited. One morning, the first egg cracked. A tiny yellow beak pierced the shell. Then another. Then another. One by one, her ducklings pushed their way into the world, damp and trembling, with bright dark eyes and little orange feet that kicked at the straw. They were beautiful, each of them. Soft yellow, warm as butter, with tiny wings tucked tight against their sides. Mother Duck clucked with joy and nuzzled them close. The last egg did not crack. The large grayish egg sat cold and silent at the edge of the nest. Mother Duck studied it uneasily. Perhaps it was a turkey egg. The old ducks had warned her. Perhaps it had been slipped into her nest by mistake. Perhaps the creature inside was not meant for water at all. But Mother Duck was patient. She tucked the odd egg beneath her and waited another day. Then another. The ducklings began to tumble restlessly around the nest, peeping and stumbling over each other. They wanted the pond. wanted the sun. They wanted to see the world beyond the dock leaves. At last, on the fourth morning after the others had hatched, the large egg split. It did not crack delicately. It broke with a wet, tearing sound. Mother duck froze. The shell bulged outward, then caved apart as something inside pressed against it with terrible strength. A long gray foot emerged first, slick and too large. Then a wing, thin and ragged looking, the down not yellow but the color of ash. Finally, the creature's head pushed through the broken shell and hung there, wet, heavy, and wrong. He was enormous compared to the others. His neck was too long. His beak was dark and blunt at the tip. His eyes were dull at first, clouded with birth slime, but when they cleared, they did not shine like the eyes of the other ducklings. They watched. Mother duck leaned close. The strange duckling opened his beak and made a sound. Not a peep, not a chirp. It was a hoarse little rasp, like wind passing through a crack in old wood. The other ducklings recoiled. Mother duck tried to love him at once. She tried very hard. She tucked him in beside his siblings and cleaned the sticky shell from his back. Beneath the slime, his down was coarse and gray, patched with darker streaks. His skin showed in places where feathers should have covered him. His head looked too large for his body, and his legs splayed strangely when he tried to stand. But he lived, and because he lived, she called him hers. The farmyard did not agree. When Mother Duck led her brood out from beneath the dock leaves, the morning was bright and warm. The pond shimmered blue under the sky. She stepped into the water first and called to her ducklings. One by one, the little yellow ones followed her, splashing and bobbing beautifully. The gray one hesitated at the edge. The others waited. He stepped forward. For a moment, he seemed almost graceful. The water took his weight. His ugly splayed feet stretched beneath the surface. His long neck lifted. He glided after Mother Duck with a strange ease, smoother than the others, quieter too. He did not splash. He cut through the water like a shadow. Mother Duck felt a small bloom of relief. At least he was not a turkey. At least he could swim. But when she brought them into the farmyard, the relief died. The hens stared first, their small bead eyes fixed on the gray duckling, as though something diseased had been dragged into their clean dust. The old turkey came next. He puffed himself until his red wattles shook, then strutted in a circle around the brood. "What is that?" he gobbled. Mother Duck lifted her head. "One of mine." The turkey leaned close to the gray duckling. The duckling stared back. The turkey did not like that. He snapped his beak near the little creature's face. The gray duckling flinched, but did not cry. "Too big," said a hen. "Too gray," said another. "Too ugly," muttered an old duck with a torn wing. He should not be in the yard. Mother Duck guided her ducklings toward the trough, pretending not to hear. The gray duckling followed behind, clumsy on land, his feet slapping wetly against the dirt. That was when one of his yellow siblings laughed. It was was a tiny sound, barely more than a squeak, but the gray duckling heard it. He turned his head. The little yellow duckling looked away quickly. The first bite came before noon. An older duck lunged from beside the trough and pinched the gray duckling's neck hard enough to make him stumble. He cried out in that rough, scraping voice. Mother duck rushed between them, wings spread, hissing, but the older duck only shook her head. "He is too large," she said. "He eats too much. He looks like sickness." "He is only a child," Mother Duck said. "He is a mistake." The word settled into the gray duckling like a stone sinking through black water. Mistake. That day, he learned the world had eyes, and all of them could hate. The days that followed were worse. The ducklings grew, but he grew faster. His body stretched awkwardly. His neck lengthened until it seemed almost serpent-like when he lowered it. His feathers did not come in soft and yellow like the others. They sprouted in uneven gray clumps, oily and stiff, with pale skin showing beneath. He smelled faintly of pond mud, no matter how often he bathed. The others called him ugly. Not once, not only in anger. They made it his name. Ugly, ugly one, mud neck, ash bird, crow duck. When Mother Duck was near, they whispered it. When she turned away, they shouted it. The hens pecked him when he came too close to the grain. The ducks shoved him from the trough. The turkey chased him across the yard, shrieking with triumph, while the young ducklings laughed and scattered feathers around him like confetti. Even his own siblings grew cruel. They were small and bright and pretty, beloved by everyone in the yard. People smiled at them. Children tossed scraps to them. The old grandmother duck praised their round bodies and neat little beaks. But when their gray brother approached, their smiles vanished. "You are not one of us," said the boldest of them, a yellow drake with a clean white ring forming around his neck. Mother Duck named him Brightbill because his beak shone orange in the sun. Brightbill loved the name. He loved the way the hens admired him. He loved how the other ducklings followed him. The gray duckling had no name. Mother Duck tried once. She called him Little Gray. The others laughed so loudly that she never said it again. So he became only the Ugly Duckling. At night, he dreamed beneath the dock leaves while his siblings slept pressed warmly together. He dreamed of water closing over his head. He dreamed of mouths pecking at him. He dreamed of the turkey's red face splitting open like rotten fruit, laughing as feathers filled the air. And sometimes, in the deepest part of sleep, he dreamed of a white shape moving across dark water. Huge, silent, beautiful. Then the white shape turned its head, and its eyes were his own. One afternoon, a farm child wandered too close to the pond. She had a ribbon in her hair and a crust of bread in her hand. The ducks gathered quickly, quacking and flapping. Brightbill was first, of course. He always was. He stretched his neck, snapped up the largest pieces, and waddled proudly before the others. The ugly duckling stayed back. He had learned that if he came near food, someone hurt him. The child noticed him. "What an ugly one," she said. Her voice was not cruel at first. It was curious. She broke off a small piece of bread and tossed it toward him. The ugly duckling stared at it. Hunger cramped his belly. He had eaten only wet grass and a few insects that morning. Slowly, he stepped forward. Brightbill darted in and snatched the bread away. The child laughed. Brightbill shook the crust in his beak and swallowed. The ugly duckling stood still. Something warm moved inside him. Not hunger, not sadness, something deeper. Brightbill turned and gave him a little shove with his breast. "Too slow," he said. The other ducklings laughed. The ugly duckling lowered his head. For one terrible second, he imagined closing his beak around Brightbill's soft throat and pulling until the laughter stopped. The thought frightened him so badly that he ran back to the reeds and hid until evening. He did not understand what was happening to him. He only knew that the world kept striking him, and each strike went somewhere inside, piling up in the dark. Summer began to rot toward autumn. The pond grew colder. The air sharpened. Leaves fell into the water and turned black around the edges. The ducklings were no longer tiny. Their baby down gave way to adult feathers. Brightbill became handsome and strong. His sisters were sleek and pretty. They spent their days preening, diving, and gossiping beside the reeds. The ugly duckling changed too, but not the way they did. His body became larger than any duck in the yard. His legs thickened. His feet spread wide and dark, webbed like torn leather. His neck grew long and powerful, but it did not curve beautifully. It bent at odd angles when he walked, and when he lifted his head, he seemed to look down on everyone, even when he did not mean to. His feathers came in gray and white, but wrong. Some were too long and hung in dirty strips. Others stuck upright like bone splinters beneath the skin. Along his back, a ridge of stiff quills rose beneath the patchy feathers, giving him a hunched, unnatural silhouette. The hens refused to stand near him. The geese hissed whenever he passed. Even Mother Duck grew quieter. She still defended him, but her defense had begun to sound tired. "You must try to be smaller," she told him one evening. They stood beneath the dock leaves, while rain freckled the pond. The ugly duckling stared at her. "Smaller," he rasped. His voice had grown deeper. It scraped when he spoke, as if every word cut its way out. "You frighten them," she said gently. "They hurt me. I know. They bite me. I know. They call me ugly." Mother Duck's eyes glistened. "I know. Then why must I be smaller?" She looked away, because she had no answer. That night, the ugly duckling did not sleep beside the nest. He stood alone at the pond's edge, watching his reflection tremble in the black water. Ugly. The word no longer sounded like an insult. It sounded like a command. The first death came with the frost. It was not one of the ducks. It was a rat. The rat had lived beneath the grain shed for months, fat from stolen feed and brave from never being caught. It came to the water trough after midnight, whiskers twitching, black eyes shining. The farmyard slept. The moon was thin. Mist lay low across the ground. The ugly duckling was awake. He often stayed awake now. Sleep brought dreams, and dreams brought laughter. The rat crept along the trough and dipped its head to drink. The ugly duckling watched from the shadow of a broken cart. He had seen the rat before. He had seen it steal grain. He had seen it bite a wounded chick and drag it under the shed while the hens screamed. No one had called the rat ugly. No one had chased it. No one had told it to be smaller. It simply took what it wanted and vanished. The ugly duckling stepped from the shadow. The rat froze. For a moment, neither moved. Then the rat bolted. The ugly duckling struck. His beak came down with a crack. The rat screamed. The sound was high and bright and full of terror. The ugly duckling bit again. This time, the scream stopped. He stood over the twitching body, breathing hard. Blood darkened the dirt. He expected horror to fill him. Instead, he felt calm. The rat would never bite another chick. The rat would never steal from the trough. The rat would never look at him with shining, hateful eyes. He nudged the body. Warm, soft, his stomach cramped. He had never eaten meat before, not like this. Ducks ate insects, worms, scraps, soft weeds. They did not tear open rats beneath the moon. He lowered his head anyway. When he finished, his beak was black with blood. He walked to the pond and dipped his face into the cold water. The red cloud spread around him slowly. Under the surface, his reflection looked almost white. After that, small things began to disappear. A chick too weak to keep up with its mother. A frog from the reeds. A wounded pigeon that had fallen near the barn. The farmyard blamed foxes. The ugly duckling said nothing. He became quieter. He stopped trying to join the others. He stopped lowering his head when they called him names. That made them angrier. Cruelty wants a wound to press. When it finds scar tissue, it digs harder. Brightbill was the worst. He had grown into a handsome young drake, admired by the ducks and tolerated by the geese. He had a proud chest, glossy feathers, and a voice that carried across the pond. He liked to gather the others near the water and perform little speeches about belonging. "We are ducks," he would say, pacing before them. "We know what we are. We know how to behave. We do not skulk. We do not stare. We do not frighten chicks. We do not make the hens hide their nests." Everyone knew who he meant. The ugly duckling listened from the reeds. Each word entered him and stayed there. One evening, Brightbill came too close. The sun had just gone down. The pond reflected the darkening sky in bruised purple streaks. The ugly duckling stood in the shallows, pulling weeds from the mud. He had not eaten all day. Brightbill approached, with 2 young ducks behind him. "You should leave," Brightbill said. The ugly duckling kept his head low. "Mother says I belong here. Mother pities you." The ugly duckling stopped chewing. Brightbill smiled. "You know that, do you not? She does not love you like us. She only feels guilty because you hatched in her nest." The ugly duckling lifted his head slowly. The 2 ducks behind Brightbill backed away. Brightbill did not. "You should have stayed in the shell," he said. The pond went silent. Even the frogs stopped singing. The ugly duckling stared at him. In the fading light, his eyes looked nearly black. Brightbill's smile twitched. Then the ugly duckling moved. He lunged so fast, the water split around him. Brightbill leapt back with a startled quack as the dark beak snapped inches from his throat. The 2 ducks screamed and flapped away. Brightbill stumbled, slipped in the mud, then scrambled upright. The ugly duckling did not chase him. He only stood there, water sliding from his crooked neck, breathing through his open beak. Brightbill tried to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time, the handsome duck looked afraid. The ugly duckling liked it. That was when he knew something inside him had changed forever. The next morning, Mother Duck told him to go. She did it beneath the dock leaves, where he had first opened his eyes. The sky was gray. Rain tapped softly on the broad leaves overhead. His siblings waited near the pond, pretending not to listen. Mother Duck looked smaller than he remembered. "You must leave for a while," she said. The ugly duckling stared at her. "For a while, until things settle." "Things?" Her beak trembled. "You attacked Brightbill. He told me I should have died." Mother Duck closed her eyes. "He says he was frightened." "He should be." She recoiled slightly. The ugly duckling saw it. That tiny movement, that little betrayal of the body. She was afraid of him too. He felt the last warm place inside him crack. "I tried," he whispered. "I know. I tried to be good. I know. I tried to be smaller." Mother Duck did not answer. Rain dripped from the edge of a leaf onto his head. At last, she said, "The world can be cruel to those who are different. But cruelty does not excuse becoming cruel." The ugly duckling looked toward the pond, where Brightbill stood among the others, proud and wounded and alive. "Does it excuse them?" he asked. Mother Duck's silence was answer enough. He left before noon. No one followed. The farmyard faded behind him as he pushed through tall grass and brambles. Thorns snagged his feathers. Mud swallowed his feet. The air smelled of wet earth and mushrooms. He crossed a ditch, passed beneath a broken fence, and wandered into the marshes beyond the fields. There the world was larger and lonelier. Reeds rose taller than his head. Black pools lay hidden between mats of moss. The ground trembled underfoot. Birds cried from unseen places. At night, mist coiled over the water, and the stars looked cold enough to cut. For the first time, no one called him ugly, but the silence was worse. he came upon wild ducks in the marsh. They were wary, sharp-eyed creatures with green heads and quick wings. They watched him approach from a patch of open water. "What are you?" one asked. "I do not know," said the ugly duckling. The wild ducks laughed, but not as cruelly as the farmyard ducks. Their laughter was nervous. They did not want him close, but they did not chase him at first. "You are terribly ugly," said another. "But that does not matter to us, so long as you do not marry into our family." The others cackled. The ugly duckling tried to laugh too. The sound came out wrong. Then the hunters arrived. It happened at dawn. The marsh erupted with thunder. Birds exploded into the sky. Water sprayed. Reeds snapped. Dogs crashed through the mud, their tongues hanging, their eyes bright with the joy of pursuit. The wild ducks screamed as pellets tore through feathers and flesh. One fell beside the ugly duckling, wings beating the water into foam, blood poolsing from its neck. The ugly duckling crouched beneath the reeds, trembling. A dog found him. It was huge, brown, and wet, with jaws wide enough to close around his whole body. It shoved its head into the reeds and stared at him. Its breath stank of meat. Its teeth were yellow. The ugly duckling waited for death. The dog sniffed him. Then it whimpered. The animal backed away slowly, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the ugly duckling's face. It did not bark. It did not bite. It fled. The ugly duckling watched it go. Behind him, the wounded wild duck still thrashed in the water. "Help me," it gurgled. The ugly duckling turned. The wild duck's eyes were wide and glassy. Blood bubbled at the edge of its beak. It tried to lift one wing, but the wing folded the wrong way. "Please," it said. The ugly duckling lowered his head. For a moment, he thought of Mother Duck. He thought of kindness. He thought of what he was supposed to be. Then he thought of Brightbill, laughing with bread in his beak. The wounded duck stared up at him. The ugly duckling opened his beak. When it was over, the marsh was quiet. He carried the taste of blood for hours. Winter came early. The ugly duckling wandered from marsh to field, from field to ditch, from ditch to frozen pond. He found shelter where he could. Once, he came to a poor cottage where an old woman lived with a cat and a hen, just as in the old stories whispered among birds. The old woman was nearly blind. She opened the door one stormy evening and found him shivering on the threshold, ice clinging to his feathers. She thought he might be a duck, and if he was a duck, perhaps he might lay eggs. So she took him in. The cottage smelled of smoke, sour milk, and old straw. The cat ruled the hearth. He was lean and gray, with green eyes and a tail that curled like a question. He called himself the master of the house. The hen was plump and speckled, with a sharp voice and sharper opinions. She claimed she could lay eggs better than any creature alive, and therefore knew all there was to know about life. "You cannot purr," said the cat. "No," said the ugly duckling. You cannot arch your back properly. No, you cannot lay eggs, said the hen. No, then what good are you? The ugly duckling stood near the hearth, wet feathers steaming, and said nothing. For 3 weeks, he lived in the cottage. The old woman fed him scraps. The cat mocked him. The hen lectured him. They told him he was useless because he did not fit the shapes they understood. The cottage was warmer than the marsh, but the warmth came with walls, and the walls made him feel trapped. At night, while the old woman slept, the cat crept close and whispered. I know what you are, the cat said. The ugly duckling opened one eye. What am I? The cat smiled, showing needles of teeth. Hungry. The ugly duckling said nothing. The cat circled him. You dream with your beak open. You twitch. You bite at the air. You are not thinking about swimming. The ugly duckling looked toward the door. The hen stirred in her corner. You should go back to the water, the cat whispered. Things like you either drown or grow teeth. I have no teeth. Not yet, said the cat. The next morning, the ugly duckling left. The hen called after him that he was foolish. The cat watched from the window, tail flicking. The old woman never knew he was gone until evening. By then, he had reached the frozen lake. It was wider than any water he had ever seen. The edges were filmed with ice, but the middle remained dark and open, breathing mist into the cold air. He slipped into it with a groan of relief. Water held him better than land ever had. In water, his body did not feel wrong. It felt powerful. Then the swans came. They descended from the sky like fragments of the moon. 3 of them, white, long-necked, and impossibly graceful. Their wings beat the air with a sound like heavy cloth. They landed on the lake and glided across the dark surface, each movement smooth and effortless. The ugly duckling hid among the reeds, staring. He had never seen anything so beautiful. Pain opened inside him, sudden and deep. Not jealousy, recognition. His body leaned toward them before he understood why. His chest ached. His throat tightened. He wanted to call out, but the sound trapped inside him. One swan turned its head. For an instant, its black eyes met his. The ugly duckling felt the world fall silent. Then the swans lifted from the water and flew away. He chased them along the shore until his legs collapsed. The sky swallowed them. Snow began to fall. That winter almost killed him. The lake froze day by day. The open water shrank. Each morning, he had to swim harder to keep a hole from closing around him. Ice formed on his feathers. Hunger gnawed him hollow. His body, already strange, began to change in ways that hurt. His bones stretched. His wings thickened. His neck lengthened until it felt like something had taken root inside him and was pulling him upward. Beneath his skin, new feathers pushed through, not soft, but dense and pale, splitting the flesh in tiny bleeding points. He rubbed himself against ice and bark to ease the itching. Blood smeared the snow behind him in long red lines. Once he froze fast in the lake. He woke before dawn, unable to move. Ice had sealed around his body. His feet were numb. His wings were trapped. His breath came in thin white bursts. He thought of Mother Duck. He thought of the nest. He thought of Brightbill, saying he should have stayed in the shell. A farmer found him later that morning and broke the ice with his wooden clog. The man lifted him out, muttering that the poor creature was nearly dead. He carried him home beneath his coat. The warmth revived him. Too quickly, inside the farmhouse kitchen, children gathered around, laughing and shouting. A woman cried out when the ugly duckling lurched from the man's arms. He was larger than they expected. His wings struck a pot from the table. Milk spilled across the floor. The children screamed with delight and fear. The ugly duckling panicked. He crashed through the room, knocking over a chair, slipping in milk, beating his wings against walls that were too close. Feathers flew. Crockery shattered. One child reached for him, and he snapped without thinking. His beak caught the child's sleeve and tore it. The child screamed. The woman struck him with a broom. He fled through the open door and into the snow. Behind him, the farmhouse rang with shouting. The world had warmed him only to beat him again. He survived the rest of winter in a hollow beneath willow roots, half buried in snow, eating bark, frozen frogs, and anything dead enough not to run. Sometimes he spoke to himself. At first, it was only to hear a voice that did not mock him. Later, the voice began to answer. Ugly, it whispered. He would open his eyes in the dark. Ugly, he would press his head beneath one wing. Not ugly, he rasped. Hungry, said the voice. Spring came slowly. The ice loosened. Snow shrank into dirty patches beneath hedges. The first green shoots pierced the mud. Birds returned. The air softened. The ugly duckling emerged from the willow hollow changed. He was enormous, taller than any goose, longer than any swan he had seen, and heavier than any creature the farmyard pond had ever held. His feathers had turned mostly white, but not clean white. They were the white of old bone, with gray stains near the roots and yellowish patches along the breast. Some feathers grew too long and dragged wetly behind him. Others curled outward like broken fingers. His wings were vast, powerful, and uneven, one slightly larger than the other, giving him a twisted silhouette when he spread them. His neck had become thick and muscular, long enough to coil back on itself. His beak had darkened to a bruised black at the base, fatting to a sickly orange near the tip. Along the edges, tiny serrations had formed, not true teeth, but sharp enough to saw through skin and feather. His eyes had changed most of all. They were no longer dull. They were pale and cold, ringed with red from months of hunger and sleeplessness. They looked like eyes that had watched the world carefully and found it guilty. He saw his reflection in the thawed lake. For a long time, he did not move. The shape in the water was not a duck. It was not the beautiful white swan from his dreams, either. It was something between grace and disease, something that should have been majestic, but had grown in darkness and pain until its beauty curdled. His long neck curved with terrible elegance, but his feathers hung like funeral cloth. His body was powerful, but scarred beneath the plumage. His wings could have lifted him into heaven, but his eyes belonged in a pit. A young child might have called him a swan. A frightened adult would have called him a monster. The ugly duckling began to laugh. The sound rose across the lake, low and broken, half honk, half sob. He laughed until his throat hurt. Then he lowered his head and whispered to his reflection, "They will know me now." He did not return to the farmyard at once. He waited. Waiting had been the first lesson Mother Duck taught him. He watched from the marshes as spring deepened. He learned the strength of his new body. He learned how fast he could move through water without making a ripple. He learned how his wings could strike hard enough to break reeds and stun fish. He learned that his beak could tear roots from mud and open the belly of a rabbit caught near the bank. He learned he was no longer prey. The farmyard continued without him. The ducks grew comfortable. The hens scratched. The turkey strutted, older now, but still proud. Mother Duck moved more slowly than before. Brightbill had become the dominant drake of the pond, handsome and fat, with a glossy head and a white neck ring. He had taken a mate and fathered ducklings of his own, little yellow ones, soft and bright. The ugly duckling watched them from beyond the reeds. He felt nothing at first. Then Brightbill snapped at one of the little ones for straying too near the wrong patch of mud. The duckling stumbled and cried. Brightbill laughed. Something ancient opened inside the swan. Not pity, memory. The first attack came at dusk. A young drake vanished near the far bank. The others heard only a splash, then bubbles, then nothing. They searched the reeds until dark, calling his name, but found only a small drift of feathers caught among the lily stems. The farmyard blamed a fox. The next morning, a hen found a webbed foot at the edge of the pond. After that, the ducks stayed close together. For 2 nights, nothing happened. On the 3rd night, the turkey disappeared. That death was not silent. The moon was full. The turkey had wandered near the water to drink, muttering to himself, his red wattles hanging loose with age. The pond lay still. Frogs chirped in the reeds. Then the water rose. The swan came from beneath the surface, like a corpse refusing burial. His pale wings spread wide, shedding streams of black pond water. His long neck shot forward. The turkey had time to make one strangled gobble before the beak closed around his throat. The farmyard woke to screams. The turkey beat his wings in panic, claws scraping mud, tail feathers exploding around him. The swan dragged him toward the pond. The old bird fought with all his vanity and terror, but he was soft from years of grain and strutting. The swan was winter made flesh. Mother duck saw from the nest. Brightbill saw from the bank. The hens shrieked from the coop. The turkey's feet carved frantic lines in the mud. Then the swan twisted his neck. A wet crack carried across the yard. The screaming stopped. The swan pulled the body into the pond. For a while, the water churned. Then it went still. In the morning, the pond was red near the reeds. No one said fox after that. The farmyard changed. Doors were shut earlier. Children were forbidden near the pond. The hens refused to leave the coop except in full daylight. The geese stood watch in groups, hissing at every ripple. The ducks slept in a tight mass near the trough, far from the water they had once loved. But ducks need water. Fear can delay thirst. It cannot end it. Brightbill tried to hold the flock together. He stood before them with his glossy chest puffed out, and declared that whatever lurked in the pond would be driven away. He said they were many. It was one. He said they would not be ruled by fear. As he spoke, something pale moved between the reeds behind him. Only Mother Duck saw. Her body stiffened. The swan emerged slowly. No splash, no rush, just the huge white shape gliding from the shadows, so tall that the reeds bent around his shoulders. Mud streaked his breast. Bits of dark feather clung to his beak, his eyes fixed on Brightbill. The ducks scattered. Brightbill turned. For a moment, he did not understand. Then he saw the eyes. Recognition passed through him like a blade. No, he whispered. The swan tilted his head. His voice, when it came, was deeper than before, but the rasp remained. Too slow, he said. Brightbill stumbled backward. The swan struck. Brightbill dodged the first lunge, wings flapping wildly. He ran for the yard, but panic made him clumsy. The swan moved with terrifying speed, half running, half gliding. Wings spread to block escape. Ducks screamed. Hens battered themselves against the coop door. The geese charged as one, brave and stupid. The swan met them with his wings. One blow sent the first goose rolling through the mud. Another struck the second across the head with a sound like a mallet hitting wet cloth. The third bit the swan's neck and held on. The swan did not cry out. He lowered his head, pinned the goose beneath one foot, and tore until the biting stopped. Brightbill reached the trough. The swan caught him there. He seized Brightbill by the wing and dragged him backward. Brightbill screamed, not with dignity, not with pride, but with the raw voice of a creature discovering pain for the first time. His mate tried to rush forward, but Mother Duck blocked her with a trembling wing. "Do not," Mother Duck whispered. Brightbill thrashed in the mud. The swan placed one dark foot on his chest. The farmyard went silent, except for Brightbill's sobbing breaths. The swan lowered his huge head until his beak hovered beside Brightbill's face. "Do you remember the bread?" he asked. Brightbill stared up at him, eyes rolling. "What?" The The child threw it. You took it. Brightbull shook his head. Please. Do you remember the trough? Please. Do you remember saying I should have stayed in the shell? Brightbill began to weep. The swan looked at the watching ducks. Their faces blurred together in his memory. Beaks laughing, eyes gleaming, bodies turning away. He wanted triumph. He wanted peace. But as he stood there with Brightbill beneath his foot, he felt only the same hollow cold that had lived inside him all winter. The voice whispered, "Hungry." The swan opened his beak. Mother Duck cried out, not his name, because she had never truly given him one. Only no. The swan paused. His eyes moved to her. She stood apart from the others, old and trembling, rain-dark feathers dull with age. She looked smaller than ever. The dock leaves behind her stirred in the wind. Beneath them lay the ruined place where he had been born. For one moment, he saw her cleaning shell from his back. He saw her guiding him into the pond. He saw her standing between him and the first duck that bit him. Then he saw her telling him to leave. Brightbill whimpered. Mother Duck took one step forward. "You are not this," she said. The swan's neck trembled. The entire yard seemed to hold its breath. Then Brightbill, seeing his chance, twisted and snapped his beak into the swan's leg. The bite broke the spell. The swan screamed. It was not pain alone. It was every morning, every insult, every frozen night, every moment of hunger, every time he had made himself small enough to survive. He came down on Brightbill like a falling door. The ducks fled before the feeding began. By sunset, Brightbill was gone. Only his white neck ring remained, floating near the trough in a skin of red water. After Brightbill, the farmyard became a place of dread. The swan did not leave. He claimed the pond. By day, he drifted in the center where no one could reach him, pale and enormous, head tucked as if sleeping. By night, he came ashore. The hens learned to roost higher. The ducks learned to hide beneath broken boards. The geese abandoned the yard entirely and flew to another farm. The people tried to kill him. The farmer came first with a rake. He was a broad man with weathered hands and a red scarf around his neck. He approached at noon, believing daylight made monsters smaller. His wife watched from the kitchen window. The children hid behind her skirts. The swan waited at the pond's edge. The farmer shouted and swung the rake. The swan took the blow across his wing. The wooden handle cracked. The farmer stared at the broken tool in disbelief. Then the swan rose to his full height. The farmer ran. He slipped in mud near the trough. The swan did not kill him. He stood over the fallen man, staring down with those pale eyes, and let him crawl away sobbing. Fear tasted better when it lived. The next day, men came with dogs. The dogs refused to approach the pond. One tucked its tail and vomited in the grass. Another barked until the swan turned his head. Then it went silent and hid behind its master. The men threw stones. One struck the swan above the eye. Blood ran down his face, bright against the filthy white feathers. He did not move. He only watched them. That night, something dragged 3 dead dogs to the farmhouse door and arranged them carefully on the step. No one threw stones again. Mother Duck remained. She should have left with the others. Many did. One by one, the ducks vanished into neighboring ponds, ditches, marshes, and fields. Those who stayed did so because they were old, injured, or too frightened to cross open ground. Mother Duck stayed because grief roots deeper than fear. Each evening, she approached the pond. Not too close, never too close. She would stand where the mud began to slope and speak softly. "Little Gray," she said the first time. The swan opened one eye. The name struck him harder than the farmer's rake. "Do not call me that. It was the only name I gave you. You gave it too late." She lowered her head. The pond reflected them both, mother and monster. "I should have protected you better," she said. "Yes, I should have left with you. Yes, I was afraid." The swan said nothing. Mother Duck's voice broke. "Not of you at first, of what the world would do to you, then of what it had done." The swan drifted closer. Water slid from his back in shining lines. Mother Duck did not retreat. "You think revenge will empty the pain," she said. "It quiets them. For a moment. That is enough." "No," she whispered. "It never is." The swan's reflection rippled. Behind his eyes, something moved. A memory of warmth. A nest. A wing pulled over him while rain tapped the leaves. Then, from the coop, one of the remaining ducks whispered, "Ugly thing." It was barely audible. Mother Duck closed her eyes. The swan turned. The duck who had whispered was old, with a torn wing and a cruel memory. She had been among the first to bite him at the trough. She tried to hide behind a barrel, but her limp gave her away. The swan came ashore. Mother Duck stepped into his path. "Please," she said. The swan looked down at her. "Move. She is old. So am I. You are barely grown." "No," he said. "I was never allowed to be young." Mother Duck trembled. The old duck behind the barrel began to sob. The swan lowered his head until his beak nearly touched Mother Duck. "If you stand between me and what I remember," he said, "then I will remember you standing there too." Mother Duck moved. The old duck screamed until the pond took her. After that, Mother Duck no longer came to the water. The swan was alone again, but now the loneliness had a kingdom. Weeks passed. The pond grew foul. No duck dared stir the water enough to clean it. Feathers gathered in the reeds. Bones settled beneath the lilies. The surface developed a dark sheen, broken only when the swan moved through it like a pale curse. Children in nearby cottages began to whisper about the white thing in the farm pond. They said it had once been a duck. They said it had been mocked until its heart split open. They said it ate anything that laughed. Some claimed it spoke in the voices of those it had swallowed. Others claimed it stood beneath windows at night, tapping its beak against the glass, waiting for someone inside to call it ugly. The farm became avoided. Travelers took the longer road. No one wanted to hear the sound that came from the pond after midnight. A wet tearing, a low muttering, sometimes laughter. The swan forgot how many he had killed. That frightened him more than the killing. Faces blurred, voices merged. Every duck became Brightbull. Every hen became the hen in the cottage. Every proud bird became the turkey. Every frightened eye became proof that the world had finally learned the correct shape of him. But no matter how many died, the voice inside remained. Hungry, one moonless night, Mother Duck returned to the nest beneath the dock leaves. She was very old now, or perhaps grief had aged her quickly. The farmyard slept in broken silence. Even the insects seemed afraid to sing. She moved carefully, her feet sinking into mud. The dock leaves had grown wild, broad and dark, their undersides silver in the faint starlight. The old nest was almost gone. Rain had flattened it. Mice had stolen bits of straw. New weeds had grown through its center, but a few pieces remained, pressed into the earth. Mother Duck settled into it. She lowered her body into the shape of an old memory and closed her eyes. The swan watched from the pond. He had known she would come. Part of him wished she had not. He glided toward the bank without sound. Mother Duck opened her eyes when he stepped beneath the leaves. For a moment, neither spoke. He filled the space now. The dock leaves brushed his back. His neck curved between the stems like something grown in a grave. Pale feathers hung around him. Mud dripped from his breast. His eyes shone faintly in the dark. Mother Duck looked at him as she had looked the morning he hatched. With love, with fear, with sorrow. My child, she said. The swan flinched. Do not. You were. No, you are. He snapped his beak shut inches from her face. She did not move. You sent me away, he said. Yes, you chose them. I chose fear. You let them make me this. Tears gathered in her eyes. No, she said, they hurt you. I failed you. But what you became after that was still a choice. The swan shook his head violently. Feathers brushed the leaves. Water scattered from him. No, yes, they made me ugly. You were never ugly. The words entered him like sunlight entering a sealed room. For one impossible moment, the voice inside him stopped. Mother Duck leaned forward. You were strange. You were awkward. You were frightened. But you were mine, and you were never ugly. The swan's throat worked. A sound came out of him that was almost the cry of the duckling he had been. Mother Duck touched her beak to his chest. He stood frozen. The contact was tiny, gentle. It hurt worse than any bite. Behind him, from the farmyard, came a rustle. One of Brightbull's grown offspring had crept from hiding, young, foolish, and shaking with rage. He had found a broken nail near the shed, sharp at one end, clutched awkwardly in his beak. He charged with a thin cry and drove the metal point into the swan's side. The wound was shallow, but the pain was sudden. The swan screamed. Mother duck turned. The young duck dropped the nail and stumbled backward. "I hate you," the young duck cried. "Monster, ugly monster, ugly." The room inside, the swan went dark again. Mother duck said no, but the swan was already moving. He seized the young duck and lifted him thrashing from the ground. Mother duck struck his leg with her wing. "Stop!" The young duck screamed. Mother duck struck him again, harder. "Stop!" The swan's eyes rolled toward her. She was in the way again. Always too late. Always asking mercy for someone else. The young duck twisted in his beak, choking. Mother duck spread her wings in front of the swan's face. "Let him go." The swan opened his beak. The young duck fell, gasping, and scrambled away. Mother duck exhaled. Then the swan lowered his head and stared at her. A terrible understanding passed between them. She had saved the young duck. She would always try to save them, even from him, especially from him. Mother duck whispered, "Little Gray." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the duckling was gone. What remained was hunger. The next morning, the farmyard found Mother duck's feathers floating in the pond. The swan vanished after that. Some said he flew away. Some said he sank beneath the pond and slept in the mud with the bones. Some said Mother duck's death broke whatever tether held him to the farm, and he wandered into the marshes to spread his grief elsewhere. But the truth was stranger. He had tried to fly. At dawn, after the water closed over Mother duck, the swan climbed onto the bank and spread his wings. They were enormous in the morning light, ragged and white, each feather edged with gray. He beat them once, twice, 3 times. Mud and blood sprayed behind him. The farmyard watched from hiding. The swan ran across the grass. For a moment, impossibly, he lifted. His body rose above the pond, above the dock leaves, above the trough where he had first been bitten, above the yard where he had learned the names of cruelty. Sunlight touched his feathers. In that light, from far away, he might have looked beautiful. Then his wounded side opened. Blood streamed down. His left wing faltered. He crashed through the reeds beyond the pond and disappeared into the marsh. The farmyard never saw him again, but the marsh did. Years passed, and the story changed with each telling. The ugly duckling became a warning told to cruel children. "Be kind," mothers said, "or the thing you mock may grow larger than your laughter. Do not throw stones at the strange one," father said, "for pain remembers the hand that threw." At night, ducks slept closer together when the mist rolled in. Swans on distant lakes were watched with unease. Their white bodies no longer seemed only graceful. Their long necks looked too strong, their black eyes too knowing. And sometimes, in the deepest winter, when ponds froze and the reeds clicked together like bones. A sound could be heard from the marsh, a low rasp, a wet dragging, a voice speaking to itself. Not ugly, hungry. One boy heard it many years later. He was the grandson of the farm child who had once tossed bread to the ducklings. He had grown up on stories of the monstrous swan, but children are drawn to forbidden places, especially when adults fear them. He went to the old pond at dusk with a lantern in one hand and a sack of bread crusts in the other. The farm was abandoned by then. The farmhouse roof had collapsed in one corner. The coop door hung crooked. Nettles grew through the yard. The trough was cracked and dry, but the pond remained black and still beneath the evening sky. The boy stood at the edge. "I brought you something," he called, trying to sound brave. No answer. He tossed a crust onto the water. Ripples spread. The crust floated. The boy laughed nervously. "Just an old story," he whispered. Then something beneath the water took the bread. The boy stopped smiling. The pond was still again. He lifted the lantern. The light showed lily pads, reeds, a skin of green algae, and beneath it, something pale moving slowly in a circle. The boy stepped back. The pale shape stopped. A head rose from the water. It was not the head of any swan the boy had seen in picture books. It was huge, scarred, and white as drowned bone. One eye was clouded. The other burned pale in the lantern light. Its beak was cracked, blackened at the edges, and stained with the deep brown of old blood. Strands of weed hung from its neck like funeral ribbons. The boy could not breathe. The creature looked at the sack in his hand, then at his face. When it spoke, the voice was ancient and broken. Did they laugh? The boy trembled. What? The swan moved closer. Water slid from its shoulders. Beneath the filthy feathers, old scars twisted across its breast. Did they laugh when they told you about me? The boy shook his head. The swan watched him for a long time. Then it noticed the crusts. Bread. Memory passed through its ruined face. A sunny day. A child with a ribbon. Brightbill swallowing what was meant for him. Laughter. The swan's neck arched. The boy dropped the sack and ran. Behind him, the pond erupted. He did not look back at first. He ran through nettles, past the broken trough, past the coop, past the farmhouse with its blind windows. But at the old gate, he turned. The swan stood in the yard. It was larger than the stories. Older too, terrible with age. Its wings hung ragged. Its neck twisted where old bones had healed badly. Mud clung to its underside, but it still stood with the dreadful authority of something that had outlived every creature that wounded it. The boy sobbed. "I did not laugh," he said. The swan stared. The air between them filled with everything the creature had once been denied. A name, a place, a gentle word at the right time. Slowly, the swan lowered its head. The boy thought it might spare him. Then, from the road behind him, his older brother called out, "There you are. Were you scared of the ugly duck story?" The word crossed the yard. Ugly. The swan lifted its head. The boy closed his eyes. The lantern went out. By morning, the villagers found the gate torn from its hinges and feathers scattered down the road. They found the older brother's cap in the mud. They found the sack of bread floating empty on the pond. They did not find the boys. After that, no one went near the farm. No one repaired the house. No one cleared the reeds. The pond widened year by year, swallowing the banks, swallowing the dock leaves, swallowing the place where a mother had once kept her eggs warm. In spring, wild swans sometimes landed there. They never stayed. They would glide across the surface once, then grow restless. Their wings would twitch. Their long necks would turn toward the reeds. Something in the water would make them afraid, something they recognized without understanding. Then they would rise into the sky and flee. All except one winter evening, when the moon was bright and the pond was rimmed with ice. A young white swan landed in the black water. She was beautiful in the way old stories promise beauty. Clean white feathers, smooth neck, dark eyes. She glided across the pond and called softly. The reeds did not answer. She called again. From beneath the dock leaves, something shifted. The old swan emerged. He was almost a ghost now. Huge, ruined, and pale, with patches of missing feathers and scars like cords beneath the skin. His clouded eye stared blindly. His good eye fixed on her with sudden, painful attention. The young swan did not flee. She came closer. He watched her, trembling. For the first time in years, he saw what he might have been. Not the monster in the farmyard, not the ugly duckling, not hunger. A swan, only a swan. She touched her beak gently to the water between them. The old swan made a sound deep in his throat. It might have been grief. It might have been longing. It might have been the last piece of the duckling, buried beneath all that blood, trying to answer. The young swan drifted beside him. They floated together beneath the moon. For a while, the pond was almost peaceful. Then the old swan saw their reflections, hers clean and graceful, his twisted and monstrous. The voice inside him stirred. Ugly. He shut his eyes. The young swan brushed against his side. He opened them. Ugly. No. Hungry. No. The young swan looked at him calmly, with no hatred, no laughter, no disgust. That made it worse. Cruelty, he understood. Kindness had no place to go inside him. It moved through the cracks and found all the wounds beneath. He began to shake. The young swan called softly. The old swan backed away. Then he turned and fled into the reeds, crashing through ice and mud, leaving her alone on the pond. She waited until dawn. He did not return. When the sun rose, she flew away. Deep in the marsh, the old swan buried his head beneath his wing and wept without tears. He had taken revenge on the farmyard. He had silenced Brightbill. He had emptied the pond of laughter. He had made every creature that once mocked him afraid. And still, when he closed his eyes, he was back beneath the dock leaves, wet from the shell, waiting for the world to decide whether he deserved to live. That was the true curse. Not ugliness, not hunger, memory. Years later, when even the villagers who remembered the attacks had grown old, the pond finally froze solid in a winter so bitter that birds dropped from branches and foxes starved in their dens. At the center of the ice, they found the swan. He stood upright, frozen into the pond as if the water had risen around him and turned to glass. His wings were half spread. His long neck curved toward the sky. Snow had gathered along his back. His beak was slightly open. No one dared touch him. For 3 days, villagers came to stare from the road. Some crossed themselves. Some whispered prayers. One old woman, who had once been the child with the ribbon in her hair, looked at the frozen creature for a long time and began to cry. I only called him ugly, she whispered, as if only had ever saved anyone. On the 4th day, the ice cracked. By morning, the swan was gone. The hole where he had stood was black and perfectly round. They said the pond had taken him back, but in the years that followed, travelers crossing the marsh at night sometimes heard wings overhead, impossibly large, beating slowly through the fog. They would look up and see nothing, only the moon, only drifting mist, only the shape of something pale passing across the stars. And if they had ever laughed at the weak, mocked the strange, or wounded the lonely because it pleased them to see something smaller flinch, they would hear a voice beside their ear, a rasp like ice breaking, a whisper like feathers dragging over bone. Did you laugh? Most ran. Some were found. Some were not. So remember this when you hear the gentle version of the tale. Remember the nest beneath the dock leaves. Remember the large egg that took too long to hatch. Remember the gray duckling who asked only for warmth and received teeth, beaks, stones, hunger, winter, and exile. Remember that some creatures do not become beautiful when the world is cruel to them. Some become what the world insists they are, and once they do, it is too late to tell them they were never ugly at all. Thank you for listening to Whispers in the Dark. If this story kept you watching until the end, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which childhood tale should be dragged into the shadows next. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep the doors locked, and be careful what you call ugly, because some wounds grow wings, and some wings come back hungry. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close.